Welcome to the Leslie Monday Podcast, a show for lovers of all things science fiction in books, TV, and movies. Each week, we'll review something new or dive into an old favorite. So come join me. I'm Leslie, and it's Monday. And welcome to the Leslie Monday Podcast. I'm Leslie, and today we are going to be talking about The Expanse, Season 5, Episode 8, Hard Vacuum. Now, this one was one that I was really excited for from last week, if you listened to that episode. So I kind of want to just jump straight into it and do a quick check on each of our storylines, and then dive right into the two main things that I really want to talk about for this episode. So to start off, I want to look at Alex and Bobby, and then kind of what I'm calling the Rossi team, which is Holden, Bull, and Monica, and then of course the rest of the crew there on the Rossi. We see them; they're following up on the Zemaya destruction. They're trying to make sure there's no proto-molecule. They have their fingers crossed on that Marco ordered them to destroy the sample. We shall see if that is the case. But we see Alex and Bobby catch the automated distress signal that's coming from Naomi's ship. And of course, they then relay that on to Jim. And we're setting up basically our major event to be resolved in the finale. I assume that it will not be resolved next episode, that it's going to be resolved in the finale. And that major event, of course, being Naomi's on the Chet's-Maka. The Chet's-Maka is rigged to blow if any ship comes near it. And, of course, they're going to come near it to try and save Naomi. Next, let's check in on Luna. We have Avasarala, Admiral Delgado, the new Secretary General. We see Secretary General's kind of getting his feet wet, trying to make decisions on what to do in response to these attacks. And the cabinet meeting that we see is pretty much what I guess I would expect. Disappointed, but it is kind of what you would see. Everybody's having really natural revenge and retaliation reactions. They are saying, they're calling for retaliation on Belter stations, like Palace Station, which is the station that Marco and Naomi came from. And you can kind of see the cabinet's a little divided. Avasarala and some other colleagues versus some of the others. And actually, she's versus Admiral Delgado on this one. He really wants to bomb and destroy Palace Station. And she's making good points that that's a bad decision. And I agree with her, because you can see that everyone's reacting out of this. We know who hit us. Let's hit all the Belters back. Let's hit his home station. But she makes the point that, there's a lot of civilians there. And if we do that, we're really becoming exactly what they're saying that we are. You're destroying and removing any room for peace, exactly like Marco did. And then you're going to radicalize everyone in the belt to his side. So, I agree with her. It's not a good decision to destroy those stations. But you can also see a lot of the military guys are calling for military action. And I think that's kind of just the nature of something has happened and now you want to punch back, especially when they're in the military and they have the tools to do that. Yeah, I think Avasarala needs to move on this one. She needs to cut him off somehow, get to the Secretary General, and really impart more of a thoughtful response and not just a basically a traumatic retaliation response. But I don't know, where would you land if that's something that actually happened? Because that's a difficult one when you've been attacked, you get punched in the face, your natural reaction is to try and punch that person back. So it is difficult to not want to do that. From the viewing perspective of watching the show, I definitely agree with Avasarala that That's not a good decision, and we should not be doing that. So let's run through the Pella with Marco and Phillip, and then kind of jump right into Drummer and her little fleet. We really only see Marco and Phillip for that one scene. And of course, Marco is immediately blaming Phillip for Sin's death. Because as we saw at the end of the last episode, Sin ran into the airlock to try and stop Naomi. And of course, he was unsuccessful and he suffocated in the airlock. Marco immediately blames Phillip for that. I think the thinking being, if you hadn't brought your mother here in the first place, obviously this wouldn't have happened, so it's your fault. And, just a terrible dad, You could have, worst father of the year awards. He's probably right up there with my other, there's two other fictional or media fathers that I think are, the worst. And that would be Denethor, Boromir and Faramir's dad. He's, the absolute worst father possible. And also, from Marvel, from the MCU, Odin's not that great of a dad, Loki and Thor have a lot of problems. A lot of it stemmed from him. and then we see, what happened with Hela, their sister, and it's Odin's not that great of a dad. But Marco's right up there with him, just immediately, laying the blame for that death at his son's feet. Like he hasn't already, made him a murderer and a participant in this attack. That now this particular death, though, I guess is very personal, and he wants to very personally, this is your fault. If you hadn't brought her, he'd still be alive. So kind of switching over to Drummer and her little fleet, when they were pressured into joining, because basically they had no other choice but to join Marco, they did the exchange of crew. So Drummer has that woman Carol on her ship, and we see them salvaging basically the ships that Marco and the rest of the fleet have destroyed, and they're going through, getting everything that's of worth. Are the water tanks full? Take the water. They have any ordnance? But you see, I pointed it out to you last time. Carol says Marco's emphasis is on the ordnance, but make sure you make good inventory of the food. I wonder why. Keep your eye on it. Everybody's going to starve to death. No, that's not true. But, I was like, I wonder why you're needing to keep such an eye on the food. But we do see that they intercept Naomi's automated distress call as well. And of course, Kamina's first reaction is obviously, I'm going to go and try and rescue my friend that I care, she loves her, she cares about her so much. I'm going to go and rescue her. And Carol, and it's just shout out to the actress. I'm going to try and say her name. I might butcher it. Forgive me, but I'm going to make the effort. Olunuke Adeli, but really great job of portraying a character that everyone's supposed to hate, because I hate that woman. If there's a character that needs to go out in airlock, it is her character. Carol needs to be the next one that they shove out the airlock. She's a terrible person, just given what we have on her, but she stops her, and then Oksana has to intervene and keep Kamina from basically just shooting her right there on the bridge, because she was already right there reaching for her gun. And this situation's really difficult for Kamina, because she's kind of going against what she wants to do for the good of her crew and her family there. She's trying to do the best for them and make the decision that's going to allow them to survive all of this that's going on. But Kamina's natural reaction is to fight, and, she wants to fight. I mean, she doesn't want to be joined with Marco. He killed Fred, and he killed Ashford, her two big mentors that she looked up to and respected these people. And he's killed both of them. She does not want to be part of his group. But trying to do something for the good of her people and the crew, she's there. But it is very difficult for her. And she also did a fantastic job with her scene when she finds out that, because Carol tells her Naomi's dead, right? Everybody on the Pella thinks that Naomi died and spaced herself. they don't realize that she's on the Chetsmaka. So that's what now Drummer thinks, that Naomi is dead, that she went out in airlock and just killed herself. And she has that scene where she's just screaming. And she's just screaming in all different directions because Oksana has just stopped her from shooting Carol in the head, which, she should have shot her in the head. But that screaming, and then she goes for that bottle of whiskey, I think it was, that Ashford was going to drink with her when he came back. And of course, then they never had that drink. But it was a really good scene, and her just that screaming and that rage, and she is striving so hard against her own nature, trying to do what's right for her people, and it's just a terrible place for her to be in. And I'm hoping in the next couple episodes we get some resolution for Kamina, or at least some setup that resolution's going to come for her maybe in next season. So the last people we need to check in on before we get to the meat, which is Naomi's storyline, is Amos and Melba. And of course, we see them make it back to Baltimore and to Eric. And of course, Baltimore looks pretty different now. It's pretty underwater and flooded and looks really terrible versus the pan-in shot that we got when we first saw Amos visiting Baltimore. And of course, they have to convince Eric to join their little plan to get off of Earth, which is to go to that island that summer homes are on, that Melba knows about because she used to summer there. And they're going to try and find a home that still has its suborbital ship there so that they can get off of Earth and get up to Luna. And they're just basically setting them up for that storyline, to get off the planet, get to Luna. A couple of comments for that scene. Melba is finally starting to look better, like healthier. She says the blockers and the medical blockers she was taking are starting to finally flush out of her system. And it's good to start to see her healthy again. Because we pretty much left her in season 3 wounded and shot and also sick. And then we see her sick on these blockers pretty much the entirety of this season. So now she's finally getting to be healthy, which is great. It's nice to see her that way. And then I just had to say it, Amos and the tequila. That was so funny. He's looking at it as he's walking up the steps, because that's the same bottle, whatever brand that is, that he took from Eric's office when he saw him the first time, and he sees like a case of it. There's like 2 or 3 bottles there. He's like, well, it's gonna be a long journey. Maybe we should take some of that tequila. Like, of course. That was so funny. So that brings us to the meat of today's episode, which there's 2 big things that I want to talk about from Naomi's story, but I just kind of want to give a little overview and then jump into those 2 things. But for this episode, we see that Naomi survived the space jump. She's obviously in a lot of pain. She is very injured. She's radiation burned, swollen. We see her struggling throughout this episode to come up with something to solve this problem. Maybe she can take control of the ship. She can't. There's bombs everywhere that are triggered or set to go off that would be triggered with a proximity detonator. She's trying to somehow solve this problem so that she can save her people. Her main thought in doing that was get off of Marco's ship, number 1, and then number 2, try and somehow get control of the Chetsmaka, or somehow send a message in some possible way that she could warn off her people. Jim Holden, same person. Jim, Alex, Amos, her people, her family on the Rossi, and warn them off. And we just see her struggle through various different ways that she's trying to do this. She can't get control of the ship. She improvises that radio. It doesn't work. Before she even does that, when she tries to connect into the radio in the helmet, and the wires fry and it bursts, so then she tries to do the radio, and eventually getting to the point where she finally perseveres and gets the right wire that the communications is going through, so she can kind of shut it on and off and edit the message. That's the best thing that she can come up with to do, is to edit that automated message and try and change it. And just this episode, watching her struggle and soldier on and persevere, it's just a really powerful episode here. Her journey just from in this episode. And I love how the ending of this episode goes, where it's just playing her edited message as the credits come in. It's just that that edited piece that she was finally able to do. It reminds me of in the first season when they were having the riots on Sirius Station, and you get the first big oh my gosh moment when they put Havelock up on the wall and basically crucify him. And all you hear over the credits is the PA system going on. You know, this is an announcement. There's a security or a curfew in the Medina or whatever going through. I don't know. There's something about when you have regular credits and then you have an episode it's special somehow and it's different, and they go ahead and recognize that by having a different sound or no sound at all or something play when the credits start. It's really impactful. That also reminds me of Star Wars Rebels, and there's a couple particular episodes I'm thinking of, and if you've seen Rebels, you probably know which ones. But, you know, when they change that going into the credits, it's really moving. Okay, so now that I've kind of done a really quick jump over, check-in with all of our people, let's talk about the two big things I wanted to talk about for this episode. So I know I said last time I would look up the author of that book for you, and I have. So that is Dr. Paul M. Sutter, and again, the book I was talking about is How to Die in Space, and he is an astrophysicist, so he is someone who would know how you would die in space. And I looked up the interview I was referencing from last time. He was on an episode of the Event Horizon podcast that's hosted by John Michael Gaudier. And I'm going to link it for you in the description. And of course, I'm not going to play the audio from it. Obviously, I don't have permission to do that. And it's not my podcast. But if you go and listen to it from the link I'm going to put in, it's like the very first question he asks him. And so it's basically from the start to about like the 6 or 7 minute mark, where he's just kind of generally talking about this is what's going to happen to you when you're actually exposed to the vacuum of space. And like I said before, it's the easiest to understand, most not so bogged down in being super scientific and using all of the proper medical and sciencey words or whatnot. It's just like a quick bam, this is what's going to happen to you, really condensed 5-minute answer. And it's not even like a full 5 minutes if you include the beginning of the podcast, his opener. But if you go there and listen to it, I'm just going to kind of paraphrase basically of what he says. But this is why this scene is so impressive to me, okay? Because they get it pretty much as close to right as possible. And that's one of the things that a lot of fans of The Expanse, is that they get a lot of the science as close to right as you really can. It's definitely more hard science fiction, even though we do have some hand-wavery kind of stuff going on. It's not really the same kind of hand-wavery you have in, like, Star Trek, or the magical space wizardry you have in Star Wars. This is really as close to actual science and physically accurate. So, you've watched the episode, right? Go through the checklist with me when you're seeing what's happened to her. She has the Ebolism, and that's not embolism, that's the Ebolism. I might be pronouncing it wrong, but it's Ebullism. It's like the gases and the bodily fluids swell up. So you see it really well on her hands, how swollen they are. And of course, Dr. Sutter explains, again, like I had said last time, your body has enough, like, strength to it, your muscles. You're not going to just, like, pop like a grape. You're not going to explode, but you are going to swell like that. Is Naomi all swollen and in pain like that? Check. You can definitely see it on her hands. You can see it on the side of her face. The reason that you're going to suffocate, the first thing that's going to happen to you is that lack of oxygen. Naomi, again, check. Last episode, I pointed out, she had that hyperoxygenated blood, and she took that for the reason of, you know, you, as you're going through that that jump that she's making between the two ships of space, you're still like breathing out. Like you're letting the air out of your lungs. You're not obviously going to have anything to breathe back in. So think about like you're drowning. Obviously, you're sucking back in water. There's nothing right in space, but what happens to you is that lack of oxygen because your heart's still pumping, right? Your heart's still trying to get the blood around. There's no oxygen for the blood to take around. That's why she had that hyperoxygenated blood to dose herself with. Check. The first thing that really goes is like the brain. You've got about 10 to 20 seconds is what he says in that interview. That 10 to 20 seconds is, again, it's not dependent on how long you can hold your breath. It's about the oxygen circulating your body through your blood. Does Naomi make that jump in about 10 to 20-ish seconds? She does. Check. She's got a lot of serious radiation burns, and you can see that it's more burned on the one side of her face that's towards the sun. If you go back and watch that again, the one half of her that's more towards the sun is more burnt and swollen than the other. Again, check. This is just such an awesome scene. Again, it was so well written in the book, and then it's so well done here that I'm so very impressed with it. And it might be a little bit evil to enjoy watching a character go through so much pain jumping through space with no suit, but it's so well done and actually accurate to what would really happen to you. After you've seen so many portrayals of it, Star Trek in particular, what I'm thinking of is they usually portray it as really cold, and like the person just has a really bad case of frostbite or hypothermia, and they're just kind of sitting there shivering, and maybe they give them a little red makeup on their face, but that's not really what happens, right? Or the ones that, even before that, like as soon as you pop your helmet, your head explodes like a grape, a big watermelon, just pop, and you're dead. To actually have the accurate portrayal of what happens is just really, really impressive to me. I'm trying to think of anyone that I've seen that comes close. I don't think I've seen anything really very scientifically accurate like that since 2001 Space Odyssey, when Dave makes the jump in the ship. That's pretty accurate, that you can kind of go from the one to airlock or whatnot that he was in to the other in that 10 to 20 second range and just jump over real quick. It's just really well done, and again, I'm really impressed with it. I'm probably going on about it too much, but that just goes to show how impressed I am to finally get something that looks like this is actually what would happen, and you're not just immediately dead, you don't immediately freeze, things like that. And obviously, again, what you die from is the lack of oxygen, and you suffocate. I just thought of one of the portrayals that caused a lot of controversy amongst fans was in The Last Jedi, when Leia was able to survive in space and, use the Force to bring herself back to that door. And, number one, it's Star Wars, so you have to account for space wizardry. And, of course, she's not all burnt or anything like that, so that's not accurate. But I do remember coming out of the theater, and some of the other moviegoers there were complaining about, like, you would die instantly, and going on and on about it, and the other portrayals that you've seen on television and in movies. And I was sitting there, doing no, you wouldn't die instantly, and you want to go and, like, this is not what would happen, this is what would happen. I don't want to get into it with strangers, but, it's one of those things. It's important to the visual representation of having something accurate versus complete fantasy, because it kind of gets ingrained in the culture's mind. So culturally, as a people, there's a vast swath of people that think that you're going to die just like the second you're exposed to space, to hard vacuum. And, you are going to die, but you're not going to die like that millisecond that, the air whisks out of the room or whips out of the room. So I'll stop. And I'll move on to the second part that I wanted to talk about, which is a portrayal of a strong female character. and just kind of what that means from my point of view. And I know that there's some people cringing like, oh my God, no, because in this, social justice warrior kind of culture, the term strong female characters like taking on connotations and things like that. I'm not trying to go into anything like that. Again, it's just, this is my point of view on these characters. And obviously all women aren't going to see it the same way. We're not all a monolith. But you're listening to this podcast to hear my thoughts on things, so here you go. I wanted to talk about a comparison between Naomi and Bobby's characters. And I'm not wanting to look at them to compare them and say that one is better than the other. I just think they're really good examples, if you've watched all of this show, of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about strong female character. So generally, again, we're going broad brush, generally speaking, in media, TV, movies, books, when the creator, whoever that is, the author, director, writer, whomever, is trying to do strong female character, what we tend to get, and what you can see that we usually get, is a character like Bobby. She's tall, she's fit, she's muscular, she can fight and hold her own with the boys. She's basically a man with some quote-unquote softer qualities, or perceived as softer feminine qualities from men, that are then given to this character to make her feminine and make it a strong woman character. Now, again, Bobby fans, I'm not degrading Bobby. I love her character. She's fantastic. But that is the trend. You think back across the decades, the portrayal of women in TV, in movies, in the books. When you want a strong female character, the thing that you start getting is basically a male character who happens to be a woman. That's pretty much, again, what you get with Bobby. You kind of even get it with Kamina, with her very cold, emotionless sort of personality. She's very hard. She's not very vulnerable or open up very often. And then you kind of compare that to Naomi's story throughout this, the series, basically. I was going to say season, but it's really the whole series. Naomi's not necessarily the fighter that Bobby is, right? Bobby is a trained professional Martian Marine, right? She's obviously far more skilled at fighting and hand-to-hand combat than Naomi. But Naomi is intelligent, and Naomi is sharp, and she's got that strong personality. She's got a toughness. But what I like so much in this episode in particular, and it was in the book too when I first read it, because this is the part in the book where Naomi really finally became a strong female character to me. And I don't mean that like she wasn't before or anything, but this is focusing more on the book, right? This is when I was really impressed with her. And I really felt like, when you look at a character and you're like, I could be like her, if I could be as strong as she is. Because Naomi does have strength in other ways, that she's not just, I'm the tough fighter, hoo-ha. Yeah, she has strength of character. We see that in, is it the end of season 1 or it's beginning of season 2, and she confesses to Jim what she did when she gave the proto-molecule to Fred Johnson after they had all agreed that they were going to destroy it, and she went ahead and gave it to Fred Johnson anyway. She had the strength of character to go to him and to tell him, what, I did this, and, and confess it to him. An otherwise not strong person would not do that. You wouldn't own up to what you've done. And then she went on throughout the season accepting the consequences of that, that everyone else on the ship felt betrayed by what she did. And she kind of had to start back at square one, like rebuilding her relationship with Alex and with Amos and with Jim. We also see Naomi had the strength of character on Ganymede to tell Jim to call him out when he was really going Captain Ahab and the White Whale with the proto-molecule. To say, like, no, this isn't who you are. This isn't the man I fell in love with. And to really challenge him and hold him accountable. And then when he was still, doing Captain Ahab and holding on to the whale, to say, you know what, I'm going to walk away. And she makes a decision to go. And then, of course, Amos goes with her, but she doesn't just stay, or, I'm going to stay and I'm going to, make this right. She said, no, I'm going to go. I've said my piece. I need to go and do what's right in this situation, which when they were on Ganymede was to go and save those people. And that was one of those, again, on my other reviews of season 2, my most favorite scenes. That scene that she had with getting the people onto the weeping somnambulist, that scene was so moving. I still cry when I watch it. And again, there's another example of what a strong character that she is, that she was able to face those people knowing that they were going to, just run into that airlock, desperately trying to get onto the ship, that she could be trampled. And she faced the big guy with the big stick. I don't know what he was holding, but it looked like a big stick. It was probably a pipe. But to get him on board, and then to save the 52 people that they had air for on that ship, and make those decisions. Naomi has that strength in other ways. And I think when people first started doing strong female character, they're thinking physically. They're thinking, what makes this male character like Superman? And so we've got to have a female version of Superman, so we get Supergirl. Or in Marvel, we get Captain Marvel, right? And that's not necessarily what people wanted. It's not necessarily, I guess I'll speak for myself, what I want when I see a strong female character. I want a female character who's her own person, who's a well-developed written character, who has her own will, her own likes, her own dislikes, her own agency to do things. I'm trying to think how I want to say this. A good example that's come into my mind is if you've seen Runaway Bride with Julia Roberts. One of the things about her character in that movie is, like, she doesn't even know what kind of eggs that she likes to eat, because everything about her up to that point when she met, is it Richard Gere? Everything about her has been swallowed up into whatever relationship she's been in. She always eats her eggs the same way he does. She has no personal, this is what I want, this is my career, this is my likes and dislikes, that she doesn't even know what kind of eggs that she likes, the way that she likes to eat them. That's the kind of character you see a lot in media. Or you have the stupid girl makes naive decisions, or the woman who's just kind of like doing, I hate to say it, like basic women things, or what's considered in television or movie as basic girl things. And she's never really like having a direction or a goal, an interest in her life, a direction to go, until she meets her man. And then somehow she's like a whole person now and finished off until once she finally meets the man of her dreams. And that's a lot of the portrayal, right? Especially, and then you really rewind the clock back and you have the women who were, you can have your little career here and isn't that cute, but now you're married and you've got to completely give all of that up, and you have to be at home and be the wife and the mom, and that's what's expected. So as you move through the decades, and you see women finally starting to be portrayed different ways, I just think within this series that Naomi and Bobby is a really good compare-contrast of what a strong female character can be. And of course, there's absolutely nothing wrong with Bobby, and I don't think that one is better than the other. It's just that for the longest time, we only got hard characters like Bobby, who's basically a man in a woman's body. And when you finally start seeing other characters that are strong in other ways, it really appeals to you. You really kind of latch on to those. The portrayal of Cinderella that Drew Barrymore has, I don't know how strong anybody else might agree with me, but I really liked that version of Cinderella, and I like her portrayal of her as Danielle. It's far better to me than the Disney version or some of the other stories where because Danielle actually is intelligent and she reads and she has, spark and opinions on things and schools the prince. versus the Disney version, and she's just, one day my dream will come and I'll be rescued, and her fairy godmother shows up, she goes to a dance, falls in love with a guy the instant she meets him, and all is well and happily ever after, which I guess is okay for maybe for some dreaming, but compare that with her portrayal in that story. Is it Ever After? I can't remember the name of it. I just know it's Drew Barrymore and she plays Cinderella. That one to me is far better than the Disney version. I think there are a lot of connotations with the word strong, and when this was all first happening and they were kind of showing women in more roles than just at home as the wife, they took the word strong and equated it to physical strength, which is why we started getting more characters, again, that are like Bobby, versus looking at just women to look up to, women of character and integrity versus just their physical strength. It's also one of the reasons why I think I latched on more to Star Trek than Star Wars when I was younger, just because Star Wars, the original trilogy, if we're looking at that, you have like one female character, which is Leia, and that's it. And I started out watching The Next Generation, and I had Dr. Crusher, I had Counselor Troy, I had Tasha Yar. I mean, you could just go down the list. Eventually you get Guinan. You get all these other characters that some of just come to the show for an episode or for an arc. There's hundreds and hundreds of female characters, and then my dad introduced me to the original Star Trek, and then you've got Uhura and Lieutenant Rand and Nurse Chapel, or even in the very first unaired pilot, which is funny to call it the unaired pilot now that it's been aired so many years later, and so often, but in The Cage, where you have Majel playing number one, which is the first officer of the Enterprise with Christopher Pike. Like, there's so many women in different roles in Star Trek that, the communications officer, the typical nursing and healer sort of position as Nurse Chapel. You have Lieutenant Rand be like the administrative, whatever a yeoman is that does like the administrative stuff, sort of personal assistant, I think. All of these different characters, so impressive. And then, of course, go forward in time with Star Trek, and you get Captain Catherine Janeway, and being the captain of the ship. And, of course, for the whole series, like seven seasons, I believe it was. She was the first female captain for the series, and not just who showed up in an episode. So there was a lot more there for me to latch onto than to the one Princess Leia in Star Wars, who, yeah, she's able, when she wears that horrible bikini and she chokes Jabba, but she doesn't really do much else. And I know the Star Wars fans are probably going to throw a fit, but when you're looking at the original trilogy compared to pretty much what I had at the time, which was original Star Trek and Next Generation, there were far more characters and female characters for me to look up to and latch onto in Star Trek than there were in Star Wars. So I think Star Trek also does a really good job, and I know we're getting way off topic, but it does a good job of showing you the women working there in all the various aspects of positions, right? They didn't go completely hard to one side or the other, where it's females are only portrayed as the wife and mother, so we were only going to portray them in one way, of only as career-minded women, or who don't want to be mothers, or things like that. I mean, like, Dr. Crusher is probably my favorite female character in all of Star Trek, I think. And, she's a widow, she's a mother, she's a doctor, she's fiercely intelligent and smart and fights for what she wants. I mean, like, I love her character. It's like, if I could be her when I grow up, that's the one that I would want to be. And so she's not just one thing, and they do that throughout all of the characters that they present. They're a well-rounded, well-written character who then also happens to be, X or Y or whatever it is that they might need for an episode. And again, we're getting like way, way off topic, but just to try and bring it back to the Expanse, I just thought this was a really good spot to kind of compare and contrast Bobby and Naomi and two different looks at what a quote-unquote strong female character can be. And again, to say like this episode, but the corresponding part to it in the book was really when Naomi started to be a really important character to me. That I'm like, I can really understand her, I can get behind her, and she's kind of like going up the ranks. I don't know if I'd place her higher than like season 1 through 3 Avasarala. She might be like a real close up there on her tail there, but I don't know if she trumps her, because my gosh, that scene in season 2 when Avasarala gives that tongue lashing to Aaron Wright would just like live forever in my memory. Is amazing, glorious scene. She chews him out, tears him a new one. So those are my like random sporadic thoughts for this episode. I hope that you enjoyed listening to me kind of go all over the place with this one. Let me know your thoughts. What did you think about this scene? Were you really as impressed with it, with the space jump, as I was, or you just didn't even care? You were just worried that Naomi was going to live and nothing else really mattered? Again, we only have like 2 episodes left. I still have not watched the finale. Again, still saving it. I'm going to watch episode 9 and record my thoughts for that, and then I will watch episode 10. Even though I kind of know, but I kind of don't. Again, given that they're going to wrap up things with season 6, so I sort of know how they're going to end it, but I sort of don't. I'm excited, actually, for that space that I kind of don't know what they're going to do, because they're saying season 6 is it, and I'm not knowing how they're going to leave it. So I'm kind of excited to maybe go into next season a little more like everybody else who hasn't read the books and just kind of like not knowing what's going on, kind of fresh eyes. Which also reminds me, after episode 10, we are going to be doing Travelers, and I'll start off with that. I might have an episode break where we break for a week just before we start that. We'll see. But again, let me know your thoughts on this week's episode. Let me know your theories. What do you think is happening? Are you excited for the next season? Are you severely disappointed already that they're saying it's going to be the last season? Let me know what you think. And as always, you can find all of my social media handles at my website, lalunsford.com. And you can always email into the podcast at thelesliemondaypodcast@gmail.com. And until next week, I hope you have a good one.